Okay, so this story from the Seattle Medium, right? It's well, it's rough. Outreach workers are clearing out this homeless encampment
Right.
and they find a suitcase
Yeah.
with, get this, a body inside.
It's a tough one, for sure.
Uh
It's awful, and it brings up so many questions about homelessness here in Seattle. I mean,
and it's especially tragic in this case because, we're not talking about just a statistic.
Mm.
This was a woman, Shannon Marie Caslin Reeder, they identified her, only 37 years old.
37, that's no age at all.
Yeah.
And what gets me is she was found September 27th this year, but she'd been missing since November of 2022.
Oh, wow.
Almost 2 years. It's
No.
just, where was she that whole time? What happened?
It really highlights how vulnerable people are when they're living on the streets.
Yeah.
To be missing that long and then to, be found like that, it suggests something really dark happened.
And the police are investigating it as a homicide, which is
Yeah, that changes things.
makes a horrible situation even worse. Right? It goes from a missing person to something, well, much more sinister. And the fact that this happened in a homeless encampment just complicates things further.
How so?
These places, they change so much so fast. People are coming and going, evidence disappears. And on top of that, witnesses may be afraid to talk.
Makes you wonder, if someone had noticed she was gone earlier, would things be different now?
That's always the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it speaks to a larger issue.
Yeah.
We need better support systems for people who are homeless, more outreach so that when someone disappears, it's noticed. Their well-being, it should be a priority.
Absolutely. So the encampment was near Dr. Jose Rizal Park.
Hmm.
Had to look him up. Filipino nationalist, fought for social justice, believed in peaceful reform,
Really?
uplifting the downtrodden. Kind of a chilling juxtaposition, right?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Mm.
A park named after a man who dedicated his life to helping people.
Mm.
And it becomes the backdrop for something like this.
Like history repeating itself almost. Would Dr. Rizal be surprised, do you think? Or would this just seem like more of the same fight, just, a different century?
It's a good question.
Ah.
It's not hard to see the parallels, though, right? The social injustices he fought against, they're still playing out.
Not just in Seattle either.
Exactly. This case, as awful as it is, it gives us a chance to really examine these issues, these systemic issues.
So let's do that. The encampment was going to be cleared out anyway because of a shooting.
Right, I read that.
Happens a lot, sadly. But it makes you think, how are we handling homelessness? I mean, yeah, we got to keep people safe, but just pushing people out doesn't solve anything.
You said it. It's putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone. You're treating a symptom, not the problem itself. So what happens? These encampments pop up, get cleared out, and then they reappear somewhere else.
It's like that saying, right? Out of
Yeah.
sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
But these are real people we're talking about, living with the consequences.
And it comes down to, a lot of times, perception versus reality. Well, people see an encampment, right, and they think, oh, crime, danger.
But is that really true? I mean, is there a direct link?
It's complicated. Look, there's definitely crime in some encampments. But are those people homeless because they commit crimes? Or are they more likely to be victims themselves because they're living out there vulnerable?
Right. Makes sense.
And the thing is, even if there is crime, just focusing on that, it ignores the bigger picture. Why are people homeless in the first place?
So, like we were saying, it's about those root causes.
Yeah.
But how do we even start to fix that?
$1,000,000 question, right? Seattle's tried a lot of things, haven't they?
I know they have, yeah.
And there's been some successes, but it's a complex problem. There's no magic bullet. Some people say housing first is the answer.
What's that?
You prioritize getting people into housing, period. No strings attached.
Really? Even if they're like struggling with addiction or anything?
Even then,
Yeah.
the idea is once they have a stable place to live, right, then they can start dealing with those other problems.
Oh, I see.
Then you've got others who say, no, we need more services. Addiction treatment, mental health care, job training. Give them that support while they're in temporary housing.
Makes sense.
And then there's the elephant in the room, right? Affordable housing. Seattle is booming. Rents are sky high.
Yeah.
So even if you are trying to get back on your feet, how can you even afford a place? It's almost impossible.
It's just a lot to untangle. But I keep thinking about Shannon, you know, like what if she'd had access to those resources? Could it have changed things for her?
We can't know for sure, but here's the thing. Every single person living on the streets has a story, a whole chain of events that led them there.
And those stories, I imagine a lot of them are full of, well, trauma, loss, roadblocks they couldn't get past.
Exactly, and that's why we have to remember These are people,
Mhm.
not just statistics, not just a problem to solve. They deserve our compassion.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, let's circle back to the investigation for a sec. The article said they're asking for information about her whereabouts this past year. Think they'll find someone who actually knows something.
Hard to say. Like we were saying before, those encampments, people move around a lot. They might have known her, but maybe they've moved on.
Or maybe they're just afraid to get involved, right?
Could be. Mistrust of the police, fear of retaliation, you name it.
Makes sense.
But you never know, right?
Yeah.
Even the smallest detail. Someone might have seen her with someone else or overheard something. Those little things, they can be huge for investigators.
So we wait, but at least there's a chance.
There's always a chance. And the more attention this gets, the better the odds that someone will speak up.
You mentioned earlier how finding her in a suitcase, it points to a certain kind of violence. So in a case like this, what are the police even looking for? It can't be easy in that environment.
No, it's not. They'll be looking for any physical evidence.
Yeah.
DNA, fingerprints, anything that could lead to whoever did it.
But like you said, people come and go.
Exactly. It's not like a house where a crime scene is contained. Evidence could be long gone or ruined.
So then what?
Talking to people. Anyone who knew her, anyone who was around the encampment back then, trying to put together a timeline.
Sounds like a lot of dead ends.
Oh, it can be. But these guys, they're trained for this. They'll be checking security footage from businesses nearby, looking at her phone records, seeing if there are any connections she had outside the encampment, anything to get a lead.
It's like, what are the chances they find anything useful? But even if they do, even if they find who did this, it doesn't bring her back.
No, it doesn't. And that's what's so important to remember. We talk about homelessness, we talk about policy, statistics,
Mm-hmm.
but these are real people's lives.
It's easy to forget that sometimes, but then you see her picture in the article, you hear her name, Shannon. She was real.
Exactly. And that's why we need to tell these stories. Remind ourselves that homeless, that word, there's a person behind it. Someone with hopes, with people who loved them.
Family, friends. Was she a mom? I don't think the article said.
See? Those details, they get lost.
More like they're invisible.
In a way, yeah. And that's what we have to fight against. Everyone deserves to be seen, no matter what their situation is.
It's funny, thinking back to Dr. Rizal, that park, it's kind of symbolic, isn't it? That fight he was a part of, that fight for justice, it's still going on.
It is. It's like a torch being passed down, you
Yeah.
know? And we all have a responsibility to carry it.
So where do we even go from here? What can we actually do?
There's so many ways to make a difference. Support the organizations that are out there on the ground doing the work, shelters, food banks, places like that.
Right, right.
Volunteer your time, even if it's just a few hours a month. And honestly, just learn about it. Educate yourself. Because the more you understand the issue, the more you can challenge your own biases, those preconceived notions we all have.
It all starts with awareness, right?
Exactly. Even small things can make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
A listening ear, a warm meal, just being kind.
Yeah.
Those gestures, they might seem small, but they can mean the world to someone who's really struggling.
This whole deep dive has been, well, a lot to process. It's heavy stuff, but it's important. We can't just ignore this.
We can't.
Yeah.
And we each have a part to play in making things a little bit better, a little more just, so that maybe tragedies like this one, maybe they happen less.
Well said. And on that note, I think we're going to wrap up this deep dive. But to everyone listening, don't let this be the end of it. Keep learning, keep that conversation going, and find a way to get involved in your own community, no matter how small it might seem.
Thanks for listening, everybody.